Yo, what's going on, guys? My name's Flop. Welcome to How to Heal Arena, episode 3. This episode is going to be on trading cooldowns. And I just wanted to say really quickly, just a quick shout out, quick thank you to all the people who liked and commented on the last couple of videos. Man, your kind words really mean a lot to me. I really appreciate the support, and also your feedback has been absolutely insane. You know, my goal with this series is to bring cost-free educational content about World of Warcraft PvP to you guys, so feel free to let me know anything that I can do better, anything that I can improve on. Please do not hesitate to let me know down in the comments. And if you want to see more content like this, please subscribe and please hit this video with a thumbs up. Thanks so much, and I hope you enjoy the video. All right, so first things first. All of the different healer specs play a little bit differently, and healers range from being more cooldown based to more fluid in how they play, meaning some of them are going to have heavier cooldowns that are really important to use at the right times, and some of them you're not going to have those heavy cooldowns to rely on, so it's more about how you're playing throughout the game, and you may have to like avoid certain situations more with positioning or other things rather than using a cooldown in response to aggression from the enemy team. So real quickly, I've actually laid out the healers, and this is just my opinion, in terms of being heavy cooldown usage healers versus having lighter cooldowns and having to rely on other tools. The heaviest cooldown reliant healer is Holy Paladin, then Disc Priest. On the other end, you have classes like Restoration Druid and Mistweaver who may not have a lot of heavy cooldowns and have to rely on other things to deal with certain situations. And then you have like Preservation Invoker, Holy Priest, Resto Shaman, kind of in the middle. But I've laid them out in this order, and that's just my personal opinion. And what I've found actually is that when people enjoy playing a more cooldown reliant healer, they usually perform better and enjoy more the healers that are also on that side of the spectrum, whereas the people who enjoy playing a more fluid style of gameplay tend to enjoy classes that fall on that side of the spectrum more so. There are more things than just, you know, trading cooldowns, but in general I do find this to be a good way of trying to find out which alts you would be good at. So if you play a Holy Pally or a Disc Priest, you know, maybe you'd like to try Shaman. If you enjoy Druid or Holy Priest, maybe you could try a Mistweaver or an Evoker, things like that. So second of all, we have major cooldowns versus minor cooldowns. Major cooldowns are going to be the ones where if you don't have access to this cooldown and your teammate is in a stun, the game is over, right? Or maybe you're in a situation where you don't have Avenging Wrath and you're having to deal with Incarnation from a Feral Druid or a Boomkin, you know, and you just simply do not have the healing to respond to that amount of damage. Minor cooldowns are things like Blessing of Sacrifice from a Paladin, Iron Bark from a Druid, Earthen Wall Totem from a Resto Shaman, things that when used at high HP, your teammate's high health when you press this, it's going to help them survive, but it may not guarantee survival in a certain situation. There's going to be certain situations where major cooldowns are necessary and certain situations where minor cooldowns are necessary. And again, you know, this is going to be something that comes up throughout this video, but using cooldowns is somewhat subjective. It can be black and white in certain situations where, you know, obviously looking back on this game, if I go watch the recorded video of it, I should have pressed Blessing of Protection at this moment. You know, I should have pressed Divine Shield. As a Paladin, sometimes, you know, you trinket a crowd control to heal your teammate, and then you get re-crowd controlled, and you end up having to use Divine Shield on top of it. You know, that's like trading 2 cooldowns for 1 when you could just be trading 1. Okay, so as we get into types of cooldowns for different healers, the one that we all have access to is your trinket, your PvP trinket, okay? For healers, it's on a 1.5 minute cooldown. This is, you know, across the board, a super important cooldown. If you don't have this cooldown, people are going to be looking at you trying to kill you. If you don't have this cooldown and you get CC'd and your teammate doesn't have it as well, you know, they can die. This is something that, you know, you should always think about. Is this the right opportunity to use my trinket? Is this a good trade? Or am I wasting it? Or do I need to use it offensively? This is something that is really important for all healers, and it's super important to understand when to use it. So first of all, I've separated these cooldowns into major cooldowns and minor cooldowns. For Paladin, you have things like Blessing of Protection, Divine Shield, Lay on Hands, Avenging Wrath. For minor cooldowns, it's like Blessing of Summer, Blessing of Sacrifice, Blessing of Freedom. For Druid, you have Incarnation, Tree of Life, Tranquility for major cooldowns, and then Iron Bark and NS for minor cooldowns. For Disc Priest, you have things like Pain Suppression, Ultimate Penitence, and Void Shift, you know, last ditch efforts. And then minor cooldowns, things like Rapture, Power Word Barrier, Archangel. For Evoker, you have Emerald Communion and Rewind as your major cooldowns, and then Time Dilation and Rescue as your minor cooldowns. If you're a Shaman, you've got major cooldowns like Spirit Link Totem, Ascendance, Healing Tide, minor CDs like Earthen Wall Totem, NS, Ancestral Guidance, Totemic Recall. Caster Monk, you got Revival and Cocoon. Minor CDs are things like Thunder Focus Tea and Invoke Yulon. One key point whenever you're talking about trading cooldowns is that trading cooldowns requires game knowledge. If you don't know what your team is dying to, it's going to be more difficult for you to know when to trade your cooldowns. You can do this intuitively. You can trade cooldowns intuitively and just based on how you feel the game is going and are they going to be taking more damage at this point? Are they not? But if you take the time to understand, okay, I'm dying to Shadow Priest Rogue. How does a Shadow Priest do damage? How does a Rogue do damage? You know, right now, Shadow Priests are playing Void Weaver hero talents. So whenever they cast Void Torrent every 30 seconds, they get that Entropic Rift, and that's like this big orb. When it explodes, it does all this damage, right? If I know that, and I have that knowledge before going into the arena, I can predict that after the Shadow Priest casts Void Torrent, you know, roughly 10 to 15 seconds later, they're going to take a big hit of damage. And having that knowledge allows me to understand, okay, if he casts the Void Torrent, and then he's running over to crowd control me, that's a good time to press Iron Bark, Blessing of Sacrifice. If you have that knowledge of why your team is taking damage and when they're going to take that damage, trading cooldowns becomes a much simpler thing to understand. And lastly, in this video, I feel necessary to include, what if you don't have cooldowns? This is an important thing. If you don't have access to important cooldowns, if you're a paladin with no trinket and no bubble, your last line of defense is good positioning. This is a situation you're going to find yourself in no matter what, especially in things like solo shuffle, where you end up having to overlap with your teammate because of the lack of communication. If you don't have access to outs, if you don't have bubble, trinket, blessing of protection, if you're a shaman and you don't have trinket or spirit link, you're going to need to do things preemptively in order to avoid losing the game. If you don't have access to cooldowns, your last line of defense is good positioning and good gameplay. All right, so game number 1 that we're going to be using as an example for today is going to be Holy Paladin, Affliction Lock, Assassination Rogue against Holy Paladin, Demonology Warlock, Shadow Priest. Let's jump into this game and see what mistakes I make, when did I trade cooldowns at bad times, when could I have avoided trading cooldowns in the first place, and when did I trade cooldowns appropriately in order for my team to win this game. Okay, so right off the bat here, we get the sap on the Holy Paladin, we get the cheap shot on the Warlock into the Garrote, and we're pushing in aggressively here. We got the opener, we have the Rogue on our team. It's really important that we get some momentum in the beginning of this game, land some crowd control off of the sap, and start getting some cooldowns from the enemy team. So we push in, we land the Hammer of Justice, but we're a little bit overextended now. We're downstairs, we're away from our Rogue. We get Hammer of Justice by the other Paladin. We did get his trinket and the Warlock's trinket, but now I'm in a weird situation where the Priest has power infusion. Him and the Warlock both have power infusion. They're going to be popping their cooldowns. They're going to be doing a ton of damage, and I need to get back to a safe position as soon as possible. So I come upstairs. I trade Avenging Wrath here, use my wings. So for the next 20 seconds, I'm going to have a ton of healing, trying to keep people up. But the Warlock's casting Fear. The Priest stuns my Rogue. He's casting Void Torrent. We're taking a ton of damage. So what I do here is I press Blessing of Sacrifice on my Rogue. I know I traded wings. I know I'm in a bad spot. I'm going to get crowd controlled. There's no way to avoid it because of my positioning. So instead of, you know, just getting crowd controlled and then having to use my trinket, I trade out Blessing of Sacrifice preemptively on my Rogue. This accomplishes 2 things. The first thing is that it's going to make him take less damage during all the enemy's cooldowns. The second thing that it accomplishes is that I am now taking some of that damage. So it does break this fear. If I rewind a little bit here, we see I come up the stairs, we press wings in response to the enemy cooldowns. We use a Holy Shock on ourselves, get us topped off, and then we use Blessing of Sacrifice right before this Fear lands. You can see it's just like right at the very end. Get the sack out on our Rogue. The amount of damage that I'm taking along with the Blessing of Sacrifice means that Fear breaks. We stabilize our Rogue, and this is a good trade for us. We've traded out wings, we've traded out Blessing of Sacrifice for PI, all the Priest's cooldowns, some of the Warlock's cooldowns like Tyrant and things like that. And this so far is a good trade for us. So because we had that good trade, you know, things are going pretty good for us right now. We've gotten trinkets from the whole enemy team. You know, we're pretty healthy. I've traded out sack and wings. Not too worried about dying. You know, I still have wings up for a while. I've got Hellstone. I have wall available. So now is the time for me to push in and get aggressive once again. Still have wings up for a little bit, pushing in on the enemy pally. We land the full Hammer of Justice, and now we're on the other box in a little bit of a safer position, not going to get CC'd, because now our wings is over. We don't have access to that insane healing anymore, so we need to be positioned in a way where we're going to avoid crowd control and not let our team die. So at this point in the game, the Paladin has wings up for another 5 seconds, so he's likely going to stabilize the enemy team. And my Rogue is in a Hammer of Justice. We throw out the Dispel onto him, and the enemy Warlock makes a very good play here. He coils me, ports on top of me. You can see he just used his portal from here over to here, and then he lands the Fear on me, you know, landing a full crowd control while my Rogue is taking some damage. So in this situation, I've been feared into an awkward spot. My Rogue thankfully lands the Garrote on the pally, avoiding the Repentance. And just real quickly, I did want to make a positioning note here. You know, in these videos, this series is going to be how to heal arena, And in each episode, I'm going to focus on a certain aspect. But one thing that is important to understand that there is always crossover. You know, it's not just because of cooldown trading that you won or lost your game. It's not just because of positioning. There's going to be a multitude of factors that go into the wins or losses that you have. And in every video, I'm going to try to focus on the topic for the day, but I'm also going to touch on these other ideas. So here, the Warlock lands the coil into the Fear. He fears us over to the other side of the map, so we're on top of the enemy Paladin. Is there a way for us to get Hammer of Justice back or land a Repentance, you know, on this enemy H-Pal? We cast the Repentance because we just so happen to be in this good spot, and then we reset our Hammer of Justice using our Word of Glories. You can't do that anymore in the current patch, but we push in, we get the Hammer of Justice on the Pally, and now we're back over to this pillar. So we got feared from one pillar to the other, stayed over there for a second, and then came back, landed some CC on our way back, and now we're back where we wanted to be on top of our Warlock's portal and in a good safe position. All right, so we push in, we land the Hammer of Justice on the enemy healer, but now me and the enemy healer are close together. So in this situation, both teams are going to be trading blows going back and forth. So he now lands the Hammer of Justice on me while I'm in this position, and our team is going to be taking a ton of damage, right? So you can see here the Priest has his cooldowns up, the Warlock has his cooldowns up. All of us are at half HP, so I decided to trinket the Hammer of Justice, get the Tears Deliverance out, and I may have to use Lay on Hands on somebody, potentially, we'll see. I get the Tears Deliverance out. I use Lay on Hands on my Warlock here, I think. Yes, I do. Top him off, but my Rogue has Cloak of Shadows, which is basically an immunity into this comp. So I know he's going to be safe. So I trade the Lay on Hands onto the person who needs it and get the Tears Deliverance up. And so at this point in the game, I want to take this time to go over an important concept when you're healing, and that's this idea of kind of pillar weaving. If I'm playing a healer, and this is my teammate right here, let's just give him a marker. All right, so this is my teammate, and there's an enemy that's standing right next to him. Say it's this guy over here. If I'm healing him, and this guy's casting Fear on me, I can use a global and line of sight the Fear, come out, use a global, line of sight the Fear, come out, use a global, line of sight the Fear, kind of go back and forth between the pillar and avoid CC. It's a skill that you definitely need to have as a healer, especially as something like a shaman, a druid, a paladin, something that doesn't ever need to cast, because you can constantly be going back and forth, weaving in between your global cooldown. In World of Warcraft, you have a global cooldown, 1.5 seconds, right? If I am on global cooldown, I can't press anything. So if I press this ability on him, line during my global cooldown and come back out in between, this is the idea of pillar weaving. You know, in between your GCDs, you're out of line of sight so that you can't get crowd control. And as soon as your GCD comes back up, you're back in line, able to heal your teammate. So going back to the game, this is something I could have been doing. I could have been pillar weaving, healing my team. Instead, I tanked this full Fear, and as you'll see, this positional mistake forces us to trade a cooldown. This is a forced cooldown trade. My rogue is at like 2% health, has to trade out the Cloak of Shadows. So I've traded out Trinket, Lay on Hands, and Cloak of Shadows for my rogue, and we're still not in a safe place. So definitely could have avoided trading cooldowns by having better positioning there, but it is what it is. So we're trading cooldowns. You know, we could have avoided trading some of the cooldowns that we did, but both teams are stacked up where it's kind of a fist fight at this point. We're just going back and forth trading blows. Me and the Pally are on top of each other, so we're going to be getting CC'd. The Warlock lands a coil onto me. We get a kidney onto the Demo Lock. We get a half blind onto the Pally, force the bubble out, getting a bunch of CDs, going back and forth. They land a Fear onto my teammates. You know, we're just trying to, you know, trade back and forth, trying to keep my team topped up. And we land the full Repentance onto the enemy Holy Paladin because he is overextended. That Repentance ends up getting his Trinket and his Blessing of Protection. We push in, we get the Hammer of Justice off of that, chaining CC as much as we can. And again, you see me now I'm doing the pillar weaving thing, probably because in my head I knew I could have avoided that CC. Tanking Fears as a healer never feels good. You end up far away, your teammate has to use a cooldown, and you're like, you know, you're just like, man, like I know I could have avoided that CC. But again, that's one of the important parts of going back and watching your games. You can, I mean, even me, somebody who's been playing this game for over 10 years, you know, at a high level, I can still go back and see mistakes everywhere. You know, there's all kinds of things I could have done better. So here, I know my rogue is taking a ton of damage. I trade out the Blessing of Sacrifice, trying to keep my rogue healthy, get aggressive. I really love the momentum that we have as a team here, and I don't want us to lose. So I get full feared. I bubble out of the Fear and dispel my Warlock's Fear because the Pally's in a kidney shot. The Warlock is super low. It's time to just push, push, push. This is another way you can use cooldowns. Sometimes in games, you can use CDs aggressively, you know. It's more common in something like a Holy Paladin, but if you have Blessing of Protection and your rogue is in a kidney shot and he doesn't have Trinket, you can immune the kidney shot, get him out. It's almost like he has Trinket, right? And he can just push in and get aggressive. Sometimes there is such a thing as using cooldowns aggressively. I'd say 90% of the time, you're going to be using them defensively to keep your team alive. But there is that 10% where if you have access to a cooldown and you can use it aggressively to win the game, you might as well. But you're always taking that risk. If you use a cooldown aggressively, later on, you can get punished for it. But the more games you play, the more you understand, the momentum and when the win condition is actually happening. Just going back to that same idea of game knowledge, like if you understand when you're going to win, you can understand when you're going to use cooldowns aggressively. But again, that's something that takes time to understand and something that you can definitely learn from watching your own games and seeing, oh, we could have won right here if I just used Blessing of Protection on my melee DPS or something like that. So after we trade out the bubble, we land the full fear into the full rep. It breaks to the Garrote. We land the half hodge onto the Pally. Pushing in, getting aggressive. I have access to 2 Blessing of Protections, right? That's kind of all I have is 2 Blessings of Protection, right? I have Trinket coming up in 10 seconds, but, I need to be aware at this point that I don't have that much left, especially not for myself, not having bubble. So again, right here at this point in the game, I dispel, I get Dispel Horrified from dispelling Vampiric Touch, and this is another point. Look, I use a global on my rogue. I'm lining during my GCD, and I come out right as this fear is ending. I'm coming back into this dude's line. I just could have stayed out of line for another millisecond, and I wouldn't have gotten feared. I'm pretty sure I end up having to trinket this CC. No, not yet, I guess. But, we just tank a fear there for no reason. Our rogue has to run away. We trade the Blessing of Protection out on our rogue. At this point in the game, I'm just thinking, I need to keep him aggressive. I need him, to be taking as little damage as possible. Blessing of Protection immunes a lot of the physical damage from the pets. It's not much, but it does help a little bit. And I'm not worried about Forbearance because I don't have Lay on Hands. So I'm just trying to keep him as aggressive as possible. Pally lands the Hammer of Justice on me. I trinket it straight into the half Shadow Fury, which probably was avoidable as well. But there's just no chance I want to sit that full Hammer of Justice right now. I'm happy to trade out the trinket. This is a point where, the game is coming to an end. I need to keep my team up. I need to recover as soon as possible. And we need to push and try to win the game. And so right here is another key moment. All right, so my rogue's getting low, but the priest is attacking me. The priest knows I don't have wall. I don't have bubble. I don't have wings. I have very limited tools to keep myself alive. And right here is one of those situations where, going back to the slideshow, the last slide, what do I do if I don't have cooldowns? So right here, I'm in a full stun. I have no option, right? It looks like I'm just dead. I'm 20% health. Am I going to cast a Searing Glare on this guy? Am I going to, just press one Word of Glory and be fine? Probably not, Dampening's at 14%. He's got all this damage rolling on me. So the one tool that I do have is Hammer of Justice, and that's exactly what I do. I land the Hammer of Justice onto the priest, stop his damage, land a Word of Glory on myself. Thankfully, I get another proc. I'm just trying to heal myself as much as I can. So right there, didn't have a cooldown to use as a reply. So we used the crowd control in order to make up for the fact that we do not have any kind of cooldown to keep us up. So we're all getting low here. Right after the priest did his go on me, I press the wings, trying to keep everybody up. Unfortunately, I get feared again. These are fears that I definitely could have avoided. Go back, watch your games. This is the 3rd fear in this game that I could have avoided. I'm pretty sure I could have kicked him here. Yeah, if I just kept running towards the Warlock that he's casting this fear, if I saw him casting it, could have easily just interrupted that fear. No need to tank this kind of crowd control, but we do have the wings up. I'm pretty sure this fear does break. We're spamming out as much heals as we can. We get silenced, but we do have wings up again. Very, very strong cooldown. Our heals are going to be topping us. Just one ability is going to top people. So my rogue now gets axe tossed. I'm spamming that Blessing of Protection. Bop the axe toss, immunes it, gets him out. He's taking less damage. The enemy paladin's in a full fear. It's time to win the game, baby. So we're pushing in, trying to get some CC now for ourselves. We land the half blind. Priest gets a fear on us before we get there. But we're going to hopefully push in and end this game pretty soon. We get full repped, but my rogue over here is avoiding damage while I'm CC'd. Again, going to these notes on positioning, my rogue sees that I was in a full fear into a full repentance. Look where he's at. He's over here, this little yellow arrow right here. He's behind the pillar, avoiding all damage. Now the CC's over. I get the full hodge onto the Pally. I have wings back up. I land the full repentance, and this Warlock is just totally dead. Okay, so for our second example, we're going to take a look at a shuffle game. And in solo shuffle, cooldown trading is a much more, let's say, frustrating thing, because it's often that your teammate will use cooldowns when they don't need to, or will die without using their cooldowns. So let's jump into this game and see what happens. So in the very beginning of the game, my monk is super overextended. He's really far away. The Devastation Evoker is in between me and him, and he's taking a lot of damage right away. We got the Tears Deliverance up. We use the Aura Mastery to try to reduce his damage, but then he goes out of range and is going to be really far away. So the Devastation Evoker is casting Sleepwalk on us. My monk is at about 60%, so I know that I will Blessing of Sacrifice him, break the sleep on myself, and he's going to be completely fine. So I put the Blessing of Sacrifice on him, I get out of the CC, and I top him, and unfortunately, he uses Trinket and Touch of Karma, overlapping with me. So as a healer, your DPS are going to do this in solo shuffle. They're going to use cooldowns when, they don't need to. And this guy did exactly that. So I'm cognizant of that. I'm aware that I'm going to need to save this guy later because he just wasted his cooldowns. So we're trying to use this momentum to get some CC. You know, my Windwalker just traded his Trinket Karma. You know, I traded Sack. So we use too many cooldowns, but let's at least try to get offensive a little bit. Unfortunately, he pushes in, takes a bunch of unnecessary damage, and then has to run away with his cooldowns up. So I trade Wings, get him topped off. He uses Wall. Again, so we've overlapped Sack with Karma, and now we're overlapping Wings with Wall. But we trade the Wings out during the offensive CDs. We're trading a lot of cooldowns. My monk has no trinket. I have bubble, I have trinket, I have 2 bops. I get full sleptwalk here, but my monk is pretty high HP. And at this point, I don't have a lot of trust in my teammate. You know, he's hitting 46%, and I don't think he's going to react properly with, you know, pressing Diffuse Magic. So as I get re-CC'd, I use Trinket and try to top him. But unfortunately, once again, we overlap my Trinket with his Diffuse Magic. So we've overlapped a bunch of stuff. And at this point, I'm like, okay, we just got to keep this dude topped off as much as we can, get CC whenever we can. We just landed the 4 Repentance onto the enemy healer there, and we just need to be as aggressive as possible. I'm going to need a Blessing of Protection him aggressively. You know, as soon as he's taking a lot of damage, I just need to get that out early, and then I can have lay on hands for later. You know, hopefully by the time my Wings comes back up, I'll be able to use it in a good way. So he's running away. I give him freedom because I want him to get away and just, you know, I'm not in CC. You can go out and push out, but, you know, we get stunned together. I get full sleepwalked. All my team is at half HP. And here I'm just like, okay, I got to trade out the bubble. This is an example of a game where the cooldown trading doesn't go perfectly as planned, but you just got to do with it what you can and trade out as much as you can just to try to keep your team offensive. So I'm playing pretty aggressively. I Hammer of Justice this Warlock here because if the healer takes time to dispel him, he's probably going to die on that GCD. You know, he actually, you can see here, he used the global rewind. If he didn't use that, this Warlock probably would have died, almost guaranteed would have died. He does dispel it late, but, you know, decent use of Hammer of Justice, something to keep in mind in your games. And right here, I know I have no outs, so I'm on the pillar trying to avoid CC. You can see the Devastation Evoker blinks over, tries to cast a Sleepwalk on me. Again, one of the situations, what do you do when you don't have cooldowns? You have to rely on your positioning, you have to rely on good gameplay. So I avoid that first Sleepwalk, but as I come around to the other side of the pillar, the other Evoker starts casting Sleepwalk, he gets incapped, and then he starts casting it again on me. And once again, we use Blessing of Sacrifice preemptively. One of those minor cooldowns like Iron Bark, Earthen Wall Totem, Blessing of Sacrifice. If you can use them preemptively on crowd control on yourself, that is when you're going to be getting the most value, especially when your teammate is at a high HP. So we traded out the Blessing of Sacrifice on the sleep. It ends up breaking. We get the freedom out onto our monk, just trying to keep us aggressive. Let's push in. And here the monk ends up behind the pillar again in a coil, in a stun. I know he's going to be taking a ton of damage most likely, so I trade out the Blessing of Protection. I get axe tossed. I have no trinket for 10 seconds. I'm like, man, there's no way I'm going to have to bop this guy twice. If anything, you know, later on, I'm going to have to lay on hands him. So I'm getting myself out of this axe toss, getting myself topped up, and laying a full Hammer of Justice on the Preservation Evoker as soon as his nullifying shrouds are over. So again, if your teammates are trading cooldowns badly and you somehow can use your cooldowns aggressively to start winning the game, that's what you got to do. Land the full Hammer of Justice. We have no bops. We do have lay on hands for our homie, but we have Wings up in 5 seconds. So we're kind of relying on Trinket and Wings together. And that's what happens right here. We get sleeped. My monk starts dying. I get the Wings. Didn't actually have to use the Trinket. And I think this Wings is just enough to push us over the edge and land that kill. All right, and for our last example, we're going to be jumping into another solo shuffle round, except this time I'm on the Disc Priest, and we're healing Elemental Shaman DK, and we're fighting Affliction Warlock Frostmage with the Disc Priest on the other enemy team as well. One thing in solo shuffle that is important to understand is the kinds of matchups that you're walking into. Not every round is the same, and it's important to understand whether your team is the aggressor or the defender. Are you going to be the ones running at them all game, running them down and trying to kill them, or are you going to be the ones kind to like drag them out, elongate the game, make the game last longer, and win in a longer game? So in this game, I understand that as the Ellie Shaman with a DK on my team running at a Warlock, we are going to be the aggressors. So immediately I take this middle pillar, and I'm trying to position myself in a way where I can do damage to the Warlock, help my team win the game, dispel them from crowd control, all those types of things. You see the mage is standing right over here near me. Obviously, he's going to try to CC me. We run at him, use the fade, land the fear onto him, and we net the mage's trinket for that. I dispel the Frost Nova, and I actually could have gotten this Shadow War Death here if I turned my camera and faced him, but we get full sheets. He presses Veins. He doesn't have trinket, so he gets full hexed. So the fact that we got the mage's trinket there with that fear was really good for our team overall. We trade out the Power Infusion, just trying to keep our team offensive. And you can see here that I traded Rapture at a pretty early point in the game. It's this way with things like Avenging Wrath, Rapture, Incarnation Tree of Life. I put Rapture in a minor CD category, but honestly, it's probably a major one. This is basically, you know, the buff lasts for 30 seconds. You have these massive shields. So early on in the game, when you have cooldowns that are kind of going to keep everybody safe as long as you're not going to get CC'd, it's a good idea to be on a pillar away from crowd control and trade out that major or minor cooldown that's going to help your team stay steady. On Shaman, it could be something like Earthen Wall Totem, you know, things like that. So here, we're trading out the Rapture Shields in the beginning of this game, but as you can see, we've actually run out of Rapture Shields. The Lock has Haunt active, he's getting coiled, it's the end of the Mage's Veins, and I know I'm almost out of things to heal my Ellie Shaman, so I go ahead and trade out a charge of Pain Suppression. You know, arguably I could have maybe held it and tried to get off the, you know, the Ultimate Penitence. Maybe I could have traded this ability and, you know, try to just get a big shield on him, but you have 2 charges of Pain Suppression, and one thing about cooldowns is that they're gonna recharge eventually. So if you use 1 charge of something, if you use 1 cooldown, you know, if you have other ones to kind of make up for it, by the time the other one rotates back, it could help you out later in the game. And you will see in this game, I actually do get that 3rd Pain Suppression. Trading 1 out early is sometimes not a very bad idea. And another thing that this Pain Suppression does is that it allows me to focus on the DK. You know, this Affliction Lock Frost Mage is going to be hitting both targets. So while my Ellie has Pain Suppression on him, I can focus more of my healing on the DK, keep him healthy, keep him topped off, and just, you know, try to stabilize the team. So jumping forward a little bit in this game, the enemy CDs are over. And again, this is an example of when I could use, you know, a defensive cooldown offensively. So here, you know, I know that we're relatively safe, but you know, they could get some damage rolling. So I start casting the Ultimate Penitence, and I actually juke out the counter spell from the enemy Warlock, get that precog, and we go ahead and just use this Ultimate Penitence. Our team is going to be stable, we're going to be safe, and we're going to be pumping out a ton of damage. We get the Warlock's wall with this, and we're just like, you know, keeping our team healthy, pushing in, keep that momentum. We are the aggressors. I'm playing Ellie Shaman DK. We're attacking a Warlock. I want to keep my team as offensive as possible and just help them win the game whatever way I can. So at this point, you know, I should have probably moved around to this side of the pillar so that I could attack the Warlock and not be in the Mage's line of sight, but I'm unable to do that. So, you know, I'm just attacking the Mage a little bit here in a sec, just, you know, getting damage rolling, trying to keep my team aggressive, not doing anything crazy. If we push up a little bit, we leave the pillar for a second, the Mage gets a Veins proc and gets the full sheep on us. And at this point, I'm forced to make a decision. Do I sit this or do I trinket this? I could sit this and hope that, you know, my Ellie sees that the Mage got a Veins proc and is going to do a ton of damage and uses that wall at high HP. Or I could trinket before he gets low and keep him healthy. And that's what I decided to do. I decided to trade out the trinket, get the big shield on him, save his wall for when I am in unavoidable CC and there's nothing I could do about it. I Shadow Ward Death, the repolymorph. I'm just trying to keep my team as aggressive as possible. I've traded out PS, trinket, and even here, I trade out the Power Ward Barrier. I'm like, dude, I'm just going to try to keep these guys up. We are the aggressors. Like, let's win this game. I'm going to trade cooldowns back to back as long as I can so that they are able to land a kill. Trade out the Rapture once again. Rapture lasts so long, just like Treeform or Avenging Wrath, that even if it's not like the time that your teammates are going to die, as long as you don't use all of your charges of it, you know, it's going to keep you safe for an extended period of time. So I still have access to PS and life swap. So the key thing to understand here is that when you have cooldowns and don't have trinkets, that's when you need to be avoiding crowd control. And there's been a few times that I've talked about that in the other games, but in this game especially, you know, I'm fighting Mage Warlock, they have Fear, they have Polymorph. If I don't have trinket, but I have PS and life swap, I need to make sure that I'm in a good spot, I'm positioned well to be able to use those cooldowns before I get crowd controlled in a way that I can't avoid. So we're trading out the Rapture shields and he's still taking a ton of damage and he's not pressing his wall. So before he drops below 50%, you know, in Shuffle, I don't like to let people get super low before I use cooldowns on them because 90% of the time, they're just going to use theirs as well. There's just that panic mode. So trying to use cooldowns on people before they hit, you know, 40%, generally is a good idea. Just get your CDs out first so that hopefully they see it, or if nothing else, their HP just doesn't drop below a certain point so they don't end up using their cooldown. So now we have 1 charge of PS coming up in 30 seconds. We have none right now. All we have is life swap. That's the only major cooldown we have. The Mage knows this. He knows he's gotten all of our cooldowns and he's landed a couple free sheeps on us. Like, he's trying to win the game too. He gets the Veins up, comes in for the sheep, runs in, and I think we use the Fade on the first one. We get the Fade on the first one, and he blinks in. We use Shadow Ward Death, thinking he was going to do the same thing as before, but maybe he didn't have a blink. Our guy ends up having to trade the wall out, and right here, I just use the swap. Okay, if I rewind a little bit in this game, you can see that the enemy priest casting Ultimate Penitence. You know, the Warlock's kind of dying. We get the Lightning Last on him. We get his trinket, and he's just unable to keep him up through our damage, right? He ends up having to use the life swap. I see my Ellie walled. I got 2 choices. Again, I could sit here, give him a shield, cast a penance, try to top him off, but it's already 48% dampening. He's taking a ton of damage. This is the Mage's Veins. This is PI that just got put on the Warlock. I'm like, dude, I'm just going to trade out the swap, top him off, and help him push in and stay aggressive. So we swap some damage over to the Mage. get the ice block, empty the ice block. He pushes in for another sheep. We get the we get the Shadow Word Death on that one. Fade the second one, land the Fear. He trinkets, lands another sheep. But at this point, I'm ready to throw out that second charge of PS onto my Ellie. There's nothing they can do. They're so far behind. We're the aggressors, and we traded cooldowns effectively up to this point. And now the Warlock dies. All right, you guys, I hope I did a good job of kind of covering the general basics of trading cooldowns. In future videos, I'm going to go over more specific examples and dive even deeper into these concepts, but I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you want to see more content like this, please hit the channel with a subscribe, hit the like with a thumbs up. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great rest of your day, night, morning, whatever you got going on, wherever you are in the world. Keep on killing it. You're awesome. Peace, peace.